Hello and welcome to another episode of How Are You Holding Up? A mental health podcast by the depressed for the depressed. I'm Lindsey.
And I'm Chris.
And welcome to our Rage series, episode 3 in that series.
Yay!
Chris, how are you holding up?
I am tired. I've had a weekend of like trying to catch up on sleep, failing at that, playing some games, not being very social. It's been an ongoing experience of kind of like weird isolation. But it's also, Easter weekend. So spent time with family, sort of. Just ate dinner. Nothing too strenuous, but, not exactly in any form of festive mood. So, hooray. How are you holding up?
Well, I'm displeased in the world in general, at large. I think I had to do taxes today, which if you are not in the United States, I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that some countries, you don't have to do your own taxes. They
Mm-hmm.
just do them for you. Here,
Mm-hmm.
we have to do our own taxes, and if we do it wrong, we get in trouble. So,
Mm-hmm.
even though they know how much we made. So that was horrible, and, all of
Always.
my family moved away from the state, so I celebrated with no one. I just was at home, and so I'm just kind of in an irritable state, so it's a good time to talk about, anger and rage
And
and all the things.
specifically talking
Yes.
about controlling or managing said anger and rage.
I'm looking forward to learning more about this because I desperately need help with it. If you're new to the podcast, I've spoken in the past about how I have a long history with anger in my family and those around me in general, and so I have also, I think, become an angry person in many ways. And while I have gone to a lot of therapy and it has helped me immensely and I do deal with it better, I would like to become even better at dealing with my own issues. So, it's always good to look at possible helpful tips. Although, the first thing we're going to talk about is mayoclinic.org. They like to
Mhm.
give you a lot of helpful, quote unquote, tips on how to handle things in general. We've looked up depression there and so forth because we like to talk about just kind of like the general stuff that pops up right away on Google because it's hilarious, sometimes horrible. This made me mad. This made me actually frustrated reading this, and I can't imagine being in a fit of anger, Googling what to do, and then reading this the first thing because it would not be helpful.
Yeah, the big thing about the Mayo Clinic, and the Mayo Clinic is indeed a very kind of reputable health-related organization, but the problem is they do have a bit of a bias, I suppose, for neurotypical development. As such, a lot of these listicles, these helpful hints and tips and tricks are kind of based on the
The
notion.
trash.
Yeah.
But if you don't know what neurotypical is, Chris, take it away.
So, neurotypical versus neurodivergent. The neurotypical would be the kind of status quo, the standard, the average, the I don't want to use the word normal because there is no real such thing. But the neurodivergent are people whose brain chemistry or their uh, experiences have kind of altered the way that their brain works. These are such cases as like autism, PTSD, ADHD,
ADHD. Yep.
yeah, et cetera, et cetera. So these also include learning disabilities like, um, oh my god,
Dyslexia.
dyslexia, yep, dysgraphia, et cetera, things like that, where you just can't, keep up or whatever the case may be, quote unquote, with big quote unquote on those, with what is expected of you in, I guess, an educational sense. It always is such a weird thing because for our experiences, we are both neurodivergent, but
Yes.
we were both also gifted children.
Yes.
So the idea of us, like, we didn't have problems keeping up so to say, but we did have difficulties. They were just different difficulties.
Actually, not entirely true. I
Oh?
was, gifted at a certain point, but before then, I struggled immensely, and I think that was looking back, it was ADHD,
Mm.
but I decided I didn't wanna learn how to read. I just was boring and wanna sit down for it. I was very hyperactive
Mhm.
and, daydreamy, and I just didn't wanna focus on it, and my brain was like, "Nope, nope, nope," and
Yeah.
I actually had to take 2nd grade over again. Well, I didn't have to, my mom insisted, but that's
Mm.
another story. So,
Yes. So
we are going to get to helpful hints, but first we just wanna talk about these things that we find very unhelpful because I think it's funny, and I think we've all been told these things, those of us who handle and deal with rage.
so going down this list, and of course the link will be in the show notes, but this is all 10 anger management tips. Um, we'll start with number 1, which is think before you speak. And I'm just gonna read their little explanation here. In the heat of the moment, it's easy to say something you'll later regret. Take a few moments to collect your thoughts before saying anything. Also, allow others involved in the situation to do the same.
I just can't imagine being in the heat of the moment and taking a pause to collect like, you need different tools. While in theory this makes sense, if
Hmm.
you're having, like, a PT if you're having if you're triggered, if your BPD is triggered, if you are overwhelmed, you're autistic, and you're having a meltdown, like, this does this doesn't help. Like,
Yeah. Well,
um
it
yeah,
took
go
me a
ahead.
very long time to be able to walk away because my innate nature of wanting to help or to problem solve often led to me kind of doing more what I would later figure out to be toxic behaviors, which is no, I wouldn't let someone walk away. I would go after them and go, no, no,
Yeah.
no, we need to figure this out now. We need to solve this together. And that's not always the best course of action. Sometimes, yeah, you do need to walk away and you do need to let go of a situation so that it can cool down, leading you into what their step number 2 is.
Yeah,
But
but just to
it's,
touch on what you just said,
yeah.
I think that this was something that actually my partner and I struggled with in the beginning was
Hmm.
I knew that I needed cool down periods or I wouldn't be able
Yeah.
to coherently I wouldn't be able to give the conversation the clarity that it required. And
Yes.
so I and he was struggling with a more codependent approach of really wanting and needing to fix it right away because the
Yeah.
anxiety of having me upset with him or upset in general was overwhelming. And so we really had to have a conversation later about
Mhm.
how I handled it versus how he handled it and how we had to like figure out a meet, like, I had to we would talk about it, just not in that moment. So I think that's something that's a really valuable lesson.
Big
It's
time.
okay, and if you're anxious about if you have a partner or a child or something that you're anxious, you wanna make it right away, you don't have to, you can fix it. There's no time period that it's, like,
Mhm.
required to be fixed by.
Yeah,
Um,
no, codependence is a bitch. Just
yeah,
I big time. I
big
I
time.
know that way too well.
I've been I've had to read a lot of codependent books and so forth. Another
Mhm.
another series coming up, codependency.
Oh, yes.
I
Um,
don't think we need to go through every single one of these, but yeah, go ahead
no.
to number 2.
Number 2 is once you're calm, express your concerns. Now that to me is also kind of a yeah, no, you're this ties into steps that they say later, but they put this in such a weird order.
I think that's what it was. It bothered me that it was like it was almost condescending. Like,
Yeah.
think before you speak. And once you're calm, express your concerns. Like, yo, we're trying to figure out how to deal with like anger management. Anger management is not just like, oh, I feel frustrated and angry. It's like I'm
Mhm.
gonna punch the wall or hurt myself because
Mhm.
I'm so pissed.
Yeah, like the other solutions, like the other steps that they have are like identify possible solutions, stick with I statements, don't hold a grudge. These all tie into once you're calm, express your concerns. If
Yeah.
you don't have the ability to communicate, points 5, 6, and 7, forget it. Like you're not going to get to point 2 and then get some exercise. Fuck off.
Yeah, I think I have to say that like I've been really surprised at the lack of information and help that there is on the internet.
Hmm.
And to be fair, I haven't done like 20 hours of research, but I do feel like everyone at the end of the day it says, "Well, know when to go to a professional." And it's like I hear that, But there should be
Mhm.
more tools online because not everyone can afford or has access to a professional, especially with anger management specifically.
No, and oftentimes with anger management related issues, there are a lot of places that, yeah, you'll have a certain degree of difficulty if you are thought to be like a violent, angry person.
Yeah.
If that's the case, I mean, shit, you're gonna have way harder time getting covered for therapy if you're a violently angry person. Like nobody wants to deal with that at that point.
Freaking insurance. So this one bothers me. Practice relaxation skills. When your temper flares, put relaxation skills to work.
Mm,
Practice deep breathing exercises, which I do think is good. Imagine
mhm,
a relaxing scene, that's stupid,
mm.
or repeat a calm to me, or repeat a calming word or phrase such as take it easy. Now, I want everyone to imagine that you're in a moment of deep frustration and overwhelming anger and rage that is just absolutely flooding your system. It's the same thing of like, dude, calm down. Take it easy?
Mm.
How is take it easy going to this is my
Oh, yeah.
personal bias, by the way. This is not maybe it would help for you.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else would like, if I just imagine I'm at the ocean, that would help. Maybe. I don't know. But for me, I feel like this is very shallow. This is something that you see almost as a joke.
Yeah, I mean, for me at least, especially with the idea of repeating a calming word or phrase such as "take it easy," I don't know about you, but the moment somebody tells me to calm down, that is immediately going to make
Well,
me
it's
go,
denying your emotional reaction.
"Yes."
It's
It
telling you that
makes
you're over the
me.
top. You're too
Oh,
much.
yeah.
Calm down. I hate that.
Calm down. You're getting too worked up over nothing. It's like, fucking excuse me, I'm getting worked up over just the right amount of things. Thank you. More importantly, I feel like also when you depending on the kind of anger that you experience and the kind of anger that you feel, if you're the kind of person that does not take to receiving orders well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Telling somebody to calm down or you should don't worry so much about it or any number of unhelpful advice. Like you are just adding kindling to the fire that
True.
boils inside of them. Like,
Also, like usually when people are angry, they're not alone. A lot of the time they're with people, so what, you're supposed to start repeating a phrase, close your eyes, and imagine you're somewhere else? Like, that doesn't
mhm.
seem like a helpful copeful. Oh, that's where I am. Copeful, that's the word of Lindsay's today.
Copeful is a good word.
Cope, hope, 2 different things. Anyway,
Yes, so yeah.
helpful, that was the word I was trying to say. Oh my god.
It's okay, we're all there. The one that I do definitely appreciate, though, I will say this, on this list, use humor to release tension. That in and of itself, that I like the idea, except the last thing they say is, "Avoid sarcasm, though, it can hurt feelings and make things worse." No shit.
He says sarcastically.
Goddamn right. The irony is not lost on me, but, like,
I
I
know.
get the idea of using humor to make light of a situation that is
But that's a different
bothering you.
situation. I would feel like,
Yes.
that's a better that yeah, and that also goes back to being able to even read a room, know the person, like, if again, if you have a hard time reading social cues, if
Mhm,
you have a when I'm thinking of the kind of rage that we're talking about right now, when where you need anger management, because getting angry is healthy and normal. Being rageful,
mhm,
where you are overwhelmed and flooded with adrenaline and rage, and
mhm.
you want to throw punches, you want to hurt something, you're not in a place where you're gonna be able to make a joke because your ego, like ugh, it's almost
Yeah.
embarrassing. When I get really rageful,
Mhm,
I even when I'm starting to cool off and I know that I was wrong with, like, this ridiculously large emotion that came up for a small situation, I have a very hard time letting someone make me laugh. Like, I get angry almost if someone
mhm.
tries to break the I think that statement is for a different kind of anger, and this
Yeah,
is a good time to bring up the fact that we all experience feelings and emotions differently in different levels, but I
yeah.
feel like there's gotta be a better way to like, someone with BPD, rage, and anger is going to experience it in their body and in their mind in a different way than a neurotypical,
Mhm,
and someone who is really depressed, I think will feel rage in a different way than someone who's
mhm.
PTSD, and most of the time, we have a combination of all those things, but I just something to keep in mind, like, your rage might not be what I would consider rage. I might consider yours just, "Oh, you're really, really angry."
Mhm. Yeah,
So,
there's a difference between, hulking out, honestly, like,
yeah.
it's great to use, you know, characters in literature and characters in,
Yeah.
comics, especially with Incredible Hulk. He's a great way of visualizing what anger is and how it manifests and whatnot. Like, there's a prime example in this, like, the 60s, 70s Incredible Hulk series where at one point, like, Bruce Banner literally hulks out in a phone booth because he doesn't have 25 cents. Um
I feel that.
and I get that. Oh, hardcore, because like the what makes people angry, like it really comes down to like more or less, I mean, not necessarily just these things, but like the big 5, I would say, are things like unfairness, or feeling like you're being, treated unfairly or powerless, you're being threatened, or you don't have people respecting your authority or your feelings. If you're being interrupted when you're trying to do something, there's a frustration. And then there's a whole bunch of like just environmental stressors that can lead to anger and being on edge. Uh, these all come and manifest in different ways. Like we talked about it in the first episode on anger and rage, where like I hold a lot of my anger in like my like I grit my teeth and I have it in my neck and my shoulders a lot. Physical manifestation of anger and frustration.
And for me, it's, like, in my chest,
And
and
you,
that's
it's in your
where
chest, and
yeah.
didn't you also say like in your gut as well?
Yeah, if I'm
Yeah.
like yeah.
So like those understandings, that understanding the where the feeling manifests, are like warning signs almost at that point. And that is where like the actual ability to control your anger and your angry feelings, if you can recognize and understand
Yes,
what's
the first
making.
tendrils and
Yes,
tinglings of the
absolutely.
rage.
The spider sense, if you will, using
Yeah.
another Marvel character.
I would have to say that I don't think these things just happen. You don't go from being
No.
happy and peaceful to suddenly switching unless there's another medical problem.
Oh, big
A
time.
couple other things that I do think are good to mention that the Mayo Clinic did say was, the sticking with an "I" statement. I know we made fun of it a little bit, but it is important that if you're having a conversation saying, "I'm upset that you left the table without offering to help the dishes," instead of, "You never do the housework,"
Yeah.
that's gonna ignite an argument.
Mhm.
Um, Identifying possible solutions, like, have you had enough food, water, slept enough? Are you actually being mistreated, or are you in a place of, like, already stress? I think
Mhm.
that's kinda talking about, like, the tinglings that you and I are talking about,
Yep.
and then taking a time out. Um, a few moments of quiet time might help you make you feel better and prepare you for what's ahead without being irritated or angry. I
Mhm.
need time out. I take a lot of
Yep.
timeouts, introverted timeouts and anger timeouts. So I do think those it's just like when I read the descriptions of them, they are written by someone I feel like who hasn't doesn't have a lot of empathy for what it's like.
Yeah, I
Um,
could see that.
yeah.
I could absolutely see that. And for me, I see the idea also of like don't hold a grudge in particular. If you allow anger and other negative feelings to crowd out positive feelings, you know, I typically don't tend to hold grudges for very long, but when I do hold a grudge, oh, that doesn't go away for a while.
Also, a website telling you not to hold a grudge so you don't get angry and that you should forgive. I
Uh-huh.
don't agree that you need to forgive
No, big
all the
time
time.
no. Uh,
There's some things that don't need to be forgiven.
and sometimes I mean, you are the best judge of character in terms of when you want to or need to forgive someone for the sake of like, I don't know, maybe you need to forgive someone because they did something at work that you were very upset by, and but you still need to work with this person, so it's better for you to forgive them for something. Unless it's something truly heinous, then you report them to HR. But that aside, um there's a need for cooperation, and if somebody doesn't also recognize that they have wronged you and you haven't communicated that to them, that is another situation where it's like, okay, Am I holding a grudge against somebody who literally has no idea why I'm holding a grudge?
And I do wanna I know this isn't, like, the episode for this, but I do
Mm,
think that at least one of these episodes, we're gonna dive into the importance of anger as a warning system when there's really is
yes.
something going wrong, and
Oh, yeah.
you pushing it down and so forth. So, there is always a possible reason that your rage or anger is 100% warranted and you need to
Mhm,
get out of the abusive situation you're in or whatever, and we'll get into that in another episode. So, we're not discrediting that your anger or your rage is, wrong or whatever,
mhm.
discrediting it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, but that said, when you have the ability to recognize when your anger is starting to manifest and when you're starting to get, rage filled, um, yeah, the number one thing that you can do if you are able to is the big caveat for this is get the fuck out. You need to walk away. Go walk
Get
away.
out.
Get out. Like go and take the time out that you need, do some box breathing, breathe slowly and really just like don't dwell on it, but also don't like discredit it. Obviously, there's a balancing act that needs to happen here. And that really is like what it comes down to
And I think
for,
you also just look,
yeah.
like, you gotta know yourself.
Yeah.
Took a lot it takes a lot of therapy for me anyway to, like, figure out when my anger is justified and when it is over the top and it's something else that, like, I was overwhelmed, overstimulated that day, and then, something small happens and I just erupt. Like, obviously,
Mhm.
that's, that's and sometimes I won't know why. There's not because
Mhm.
I'm like, "Oh, you're mistreating me," or whatever. It's like, "Oh, I don't know." It's like a lot of little things. So we're gonna
Yeah.
move on to the next episode, the next website, which I like a little bit better, and I think is a little bit
Mhm.
more fun to talk about, which is the
Mhm.
nhsinform.scot.
Yes, this is from Scotland. Their National Health Services, they have a full-on guide for, like, mental well-being and health and anger management, and they have an entire breakdown of how to control your anger, how to control your angry, um, and a lot of it is kind of there is some, like, echoing, but it is definitely a lot
In a
better at
different
explaining it, and
Yeah, and I
also,
do love
like
this quote that it starts with where it's like, "You can control your anger and you have a responsibility to do so." And I think that's so true. Like, it's an anger management thing. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say that specifically because it breaks down, like, there's a long-term anger that comes from it, and, like, the way that it manifests in terms of angry thoughts and language that we use, because there's a natural bias in our own minds towards going to extremes when it comes to like a bad situation, right? Like how
Mhm.
many times do we say things like this is never going to get better or you should or you shouldn't do that or
All or nothing should yeah.
all or nothing, ought to, oughtn't have, not fair, always, like things that are very much like black white thinking, and it makes it so hard to understand nuance or the gray if all you have is black and white thinking, which is
Yes.
really really like if telling somebody if telling somebody to calm down is kindling to the fire, this is gasoline. Like straight up the idea of like if you're angry and your first thoughts are it's not fair or you know this always happens to me or
Yeah.
it takes a lot of agency away from you and your ability to control things or your ability to understand what the situation is, and
Right.
it just kind of goes immediately to this is wrong and this is making me angry and I will stay in this anger and this rage because that's all I have right now. I've absolutely fallen into that trap.
Yeah, I think it's easy for all of us to fall into the trap, and I think a lot of us who struggle, with the rage, we're in this experience when we were very young or many,
Mhm.
many times over and over again where we were out of control, where we were the victim, where there was somebody who was a lot angrier. and our body chose to fight rather than flight, and so our
Yeah,
fight is now coming into situations that are no longer acceptable to be rageful.
big
um,
time.
so there's they quote Isabel Clark, who's a specialist in anger management, a lot on this website. She has a lot of good
Mhm.
stuff to say.
Yeah.
um, if your heart beats faster and you breathe more quickly, preparing you for action, you might also notice other signs such as tension in your shoulders or clenching of your fists. If you notice these signs, get out of the situation if you have a history of losing control. And I appreciate that it's not like the way that she says that isn't blaming the person.
Yeah.
If you have a history of losing control, you have the control to get yourself out. You know what I mean? It's not like
Mhm.
if you're really angry and you're about to have a temper tantrum, take a time out like children. Like the other website's just so awful. Anyway,
Yeah. Seriously.
ignore my little temper tantrum. I so they talk a lot about breathing, and I think that we should have been raised with more information about how much breath work can alter your state of
Yes.
being. You hear about it for meditation, you hear about it for all these different things. There's a lot of science behind breathing and the control of breath. It's really
Mhm.
hard to do in the moment of being angry. I have
Oh, yeah.
tried. It's a struggle. I think with practice I might get better. And at the end
Mhm.
of this episode, we are going to do an exercise with you guys, a breath exercise. So
Yes.
stay tuned for that.
Um, speaking of, she literally says you automatically breathe in more in than out when you're feeling angry, and the trick is to breathe out more than in.
Oh,
This will calm you down effectively and help you think more clearly. Which, if you think about it
I actually didn't know that.
from a biological standpoint, right? Like you really think about like what is it doing in our bodies when we're breathing? We're taking in oxygen, we're oxygenating our blood, and we're getting it ready to fight. We're trying to be more aware and trying to like take in our
Mm,
surroundings, and there's more of a like weird like this is big old lizard brain shit right here where
yeah,
you're doing everything in your power biochemically to just like be at your best. But the problem is with the adrenaline coupled with, whatever is actually going on, uh, fear or anger or anxiety or whatever it is, it's powering your brain, your body. So if you are able to expel and get like a lot more of that kind of carbon dioxide at that point out, it does tend to calm you a lot more because oxygen, if you really think about it, oxygen is a calming like
very
uh
true.
element. Like it's why they give it to people when it's uh in an airplane in a
Yeah,
scary situation.
to keep you calm.
It is to keep you calm. um but
They
uh
bring up, exercising again, and this is one of those things where it's like,
mhm,
if you have a problem with rage or anger over and over and over again, I think this is one of those life changes you have to make. Because if you're
yeah,
sitting around all the time and it's just
mhm,
it stores in your body, one of those
yep,
things, you create happy hormones. It's really annoying that walking and exercising is good for you because some of us don't like to exercise, but
mhm.
it is, etcetera. They say it for everything, so
Yeah. Yeah, which is one of the reasons why we're gonna experiment with a rage room at some point,
yes.
and really just, like, get all that anger out through violence. So, we'll see what that happens.
Which I'm gonna skip down the line a little bit here. It says get creative. Writing, making music, dancing, or painting can release tension and reduce feelings of anger. And I love that because I
Mhm,
think there have been times where I couldn't express my anger, and so I wrote piano music, and it was really cathartic, like it
mhm.
didn't have to be good, just like rage singing on a piano off tune. It was great. And I like that they bring that up because I think getting creative also unlocks happy things inside of you. So
Absolutely. You can use the things that make you happy, uh, definitely as a, like, escape grapple hook to get you out of the anger pit, but at the same time, if you're noticing that it's not helping you or if it's, doing that, then you could definitely take a moment and go, okay, let's get more intellectual with this process. And then it
yeah.
kind of takes you out of it that way too. Or at least I should say that's usually what happens to me is I will start something angry and then I'll get like into writing a story or something, and then I'll get more into the left brain logical thinking of just like, well, hang on a minute, I really want to make this actually accurate, so let me go ahead and research blah 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 blah, which is
Yeah.
probably also an ADHD thing, but yeah, no. So,
At the very bottom of the site, they talk about anger management programs, and
mhm,
the programs can consist of a 1 day or weekend course. In some cases, it may be over a couple of months. The structure of the programs can differ depending on who is providing it, but most programs include cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and counseling. CBT is also used in, uh, gosh, I'm blanking.
it's used in a lot of like depression treatment, PTSD
Yes, thank you.
sometimes,
Yes,
as
PTSD.
well as a number of them honestly like use CBT in some form or another.
Yeah.
It's very powerful.
Very interesting work. So, there's a lot of things that you can do to help, but I think overall it needs to be consistent in some way. Unless
Yes.
there's like a particular thing that keeps showing up. Chris and I are both huge advocates for therapy in general, but if
Mhm.
you need to go a step further, it might be time to take some courses, go to a talk, go to a meeting.
Yep.
Um,
Regular groups, there are definitely plenty of anger management groups, that exist, not that every country has at least some that meet up, and not all of them are, in that same kind of, 12-step program style. Some of them are just much more, you know, secular and kinda scientific in their methodology.
mhm.
Um, so it's all kind of depending on how and what works for you. You can make your conclusions based on that.
Now let's move on to our breathing exercise. So, you
Yes.
want to tell us a little bit about box breathing?
So, box breathing, it's also known as square breathing. It's specifically a technique for taking slow, deep breaths. It's supposed to be used on, well, it's actually been proven, I should say, to been helpful for people who are suffering with PTSD, generalized anxiety, panic disorders, and depression. But they've also used it in meditation for lung disease, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It's also used with athletes and various military forces. Either way, it's basically a great way of calming yourself and reducing stress.
All right, so the breathing is going to be a count, then we're going to do a hold count, and then we're going to do a release, breathe out count. I'm going to do the counts so you guys know when to do it, and Chris is going to do the breathing technique along with you guys.
Yes, I
All
am.
right, so breathe in 4, 3, 2, 1, hold 3, 2, 1. Breathe out. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. 4, 3, 2, 1. And then you can just repeat that over and over until you feel your body relaxing.
One of the things that they do mention as being a potential thing with this is that if you do start to feel lightheaded, because you can, if you're not used to this kind of like deep breathing and then exhalation, um, it can make you a little like woo, little lightheaded, which does help. It definitely helps in calming you down. Um, but the way that it works is it regulates involuntary body functions such as temperature, and it can lower blood pressure. And through the slow holding of breath, it allows CO2 to build up in the blood. With an increased blood CO2, this enhances the cardio inhibitory response of the vagus nerve when you exhale and stimulates your parasympathetic system.
Ah, yes, science.
Yes, this is science. It produces a calm and relaxed feeling in the mind and body. So, by basically kind of choking your brain of oxygen, it gets you out of that fight or flight.
They do recommend that you find a quiet and dimly lit environment to practice, but you really don't need to.
Yes.
You know, if you're about to go into like an interview and you're anxious,
Mhm.
do it in the car.
Yeah. Oh,
So
absolutely.
yeah, the whole like breathing in slowly and breathing out slowly, it's best if you can do it while holding
Yes.
breath in between.
There's several night like sleep time meditations that I've listened to over the years. And most of them have practiced some form of box breathing technique while you are kind of winding down go for bed. Um, and it does feel incredibly effective. So it's definitely it's it's not going to be something that everybody's going to be able to do, and it's not going to be something that's going to be easy for get the hang out of, especially if you're not used to any form of like regulated breathing. You can, if you are prone to daydreaming, you can get bored. You can get bored very easy. You can get
I do.
dizzy. Um, but the best thing to do ultimately is, if you can focus it, try to go for 4 times in one sitting. Should take you about, if you're doing 4 counts, 12, uh, 12, 24, 48 seconds total.
Mhm.
That's less than a minute. And if you do that at least a few times a day, apparently it's going to be capable of calming your nerves and relieving stress on the regular. That would be awesome.
Yes.
So, I would like to, at the very least, I'm going to give this a shot over the next week and just try to do it like 2 to 3 times a day and see how I'm
Nice.
feeling. Fingers crossed.
I'm gonna look into like art anger therapy because I think that would be
Ooh,
particularly fun to try.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm curious to see what else there is out there because, like we said, it's kind of woefully barren, the
Mm-hmm.
information out there to work on your anger right now. So we are going to report back with our findings and more information on the next episode of How Are You Holding Up? Thank you for tuning in to this episode.
Yes, thank you all so much. We look forward to hearing from you. Follow us on Instagram. Check out the Facebook page. If you want to send us something directly, go ahead and email mailbag@howareyourholdingup.com.
If you have any questions or information for us about anger or rage, if you have anything you'd like to have us experiment with or try, go ahead and give us an email or a message on Facebook. We do have people in our circles that try alternative medicine,
Mm-hmm.
including microdosing, ketamine, and other stuff. So if you want to hear someone's experiences on those things, we can totally bring someone in for an interview.
Mm-hmm.
And again, thank you for listening. Hopefully this was helpful in some way. We appreciate your participation in any way you can. And as always,
Don't
don't
tell
tell
us
us
to
to just
just
get
get
over
over
it.
it.
Fuck. Help me.
Don't let us get over it.
Don't let it.